And we are live here tonight. We are with the wonderful Joyce Reynolds-Ward, and she has a book that she's launching, The Cost of Power Return, book one in the trilogy, correct, Joyce?
Correct.
Whew, I
The
got that right.
yes.
Well done, Mike.
There we go. So tell us about this, and you were telling us before we started about the whole multiverse that this is part of. So weave us a picture. Tell us about your world or worlds.
Okay, so the Martiniere worlds basically are placed in a Western background. That is, they're set in a ranch in a fictional county of northeastern Oregon, and in Paris, because one of the main characters, Gabriel Martiniere, is an exiled heir of a very old noble family. And in any case, the part of the whole issue, or part of the whole thing that they're dealing with, is that there's a heavy involvement with agricultural technology. I got into this. The original series was very heavily based on one of the protagonists, Ruby, trying to find funding for her biobots that addressed climate change on an agricultural technology competition. That is only part of the legacy section of the Martiniere saga. The cost of power, we get rid of all of that. The main issue is that Gabe is in exile and is on the run from his family because he testified against their mind control technology. And mind control technology is a huge piece of the whole Cost of Power series and how it gets the manipulations used by it, but the whole history behind the Martiniere development of mind control technology um, fuels the major conflict, which is a feud between these two old European families that is carried over to the New World. But they also have tutelary spirits, the European water spirits, that are, you go back to the old stories of their origins. One family originates from one water spirit, and it just gets more and more complex because you have the Fae getting involved. You have the digital thought clones showing up from other universes. And everybody just gets really into the whole battle thing. But it also, just like I said, the cost of power comes down to what does it cost to gain power? And what sacrifices do you make to gain power, not just in this universe, but in others? I'm doing the final edits on the third book of the trilogy right now because it launches on the 24th. The second book is Crucible is in production right now.
Wait a minute. You have all three of these books done?
Yes, they're all done.
Good
I
grief.
spent the last 2 years pulling this series together.
So you're writing multiple books at one time?
Well, no. These were written sequentially. So I finished the first one, I went on to the second one, and then the third one. I've written several other series, and one of the things that kept driving me crazy was dealing with the continuity pieces. And so this was my big experiment in, let's write the whole thing at once and then release it at once.
So how long did it take you to write these three books?
About a year and a half, really. The rest of it has been editing. And
So you haven't released anything in the last year and a half?
Oh, I have, actually. I was also working on a couple of I have some serial stories out on Kindle Vella, And I took those stories and put them into, finish them off, polish them up, and they're out and about. But they're kind of one was a previously released book that I got the rights back to. I guess I can say one of my books was traditionally published, but I significantly revised it because I didn't like it. I didn't like the version that the publisher put out. And then the other one was Federation Cowboy, which is space opera in the future with rodeo. And then I had a novella, Becoming Solo, which was about magical witches and magic fairs. So I had, but it burned me out, and I'm kind of recovering right now, shall we say?
Yeah.
Before
So
I hit
I just want to say Joe Byrne is congratulating you for your book's birthday, which is
yes,
tomorrow,
hi Joe.
which is tomorrow, correct?
It's today, actually.
It's today. Oh, there we go.
Happy
Yeah.
birthday to you. What birthday book are we talking about?
Return, the first book of the series.
Cost of Power, book 1. And when is book 2 coming out?
Book 2 comes out on September 10th, and book 3, the September 24th. I will be putting out an omnibus edition on November 12th.
Wow.
Have you tried that before?
The omnibus or this
quick releasing like that?
I did with the first Martiniere series, the Martiniere Legacy, except that I wrote a 4th book that was released a few years later.
Did it work out pretty well from people kind of getting behind it?
It was okay. It wasn't outstanding. I think the cover was a little, I don't know. There's a reason why I just went with a plain cover for this one, because it's kind of hard to put everything in without it looking gimmicky.
You mean you can't do a sci-fantasy neo-western with data thought bots and fae river spirits? You can't put that all in one cover?
Not without it looking like a really ugly early self-published Photoshop thing.
So,
or spending a lot of money on an artist.
You have then a pretty decent stable of a backlist behind you, yeah?
Yeah, most of it is series. I have, besides the Martiniere books, which there are, let's see, the Martiniere Legacy, People of the Martiniere Legacy, A Different Life. But the non-Martiniere ones are the Netwalk Sequence, which is cyberpunk space opera neo-western, and then my fantasy series, which is non-European high fantasy. And
I have a question for you.
yes.
If your books were to ever make it into a bookstore, where on earth would they shelve them?
Right at the front. Right on the table.
Probably with the rest of the science fiction and fantasy. That seems to be the best place to put them.
I mean, they could just put them in multiple sections, and then people can discover them. If they go for westerns or whatever. But
yeah, your typical, they would be more of a contemporary western type, which contemporary western is very different from Wild West, Old West. I think if you're looking at Wild West, Old West, the closest that these would come would be what an old line called the Double D Westerns, which were pretty gritty. But they also delved into issues that, Native American issues, and they weren't all just your typically what you think of with the Old West. So it would be, and contemporary Western tends to fall more in the literary category. I'm talking people like Ivan Doig and Laura Pritchett, for one. But Ivan Doig is probably the most recognizable of the batch. Norman MacLean, like a river runs through it. Yeah, a little bit of Yellowstone, though. Ivan Doig is a better fit. Or if you look at the mystery genre, Craig Johnson and the Longmire series, I would say it's more like Longmire in some respects.
So you sound like you also do a fair bit of reading in addition to being fairly prolific on the keyboard.
Yes, I am one of those fast readers. I read a lot. There's a reason why my library, my ebook library is like I have a library card, and I read ebooks through the library, and my tablet gets a lot of work. but I also have a very sizable personal library as well.
There's a little bit of thing going on in the chat here discussing the background behind you, and it's whereas Mike's and I are fairly curated, I guess is probably the kindest way to say it. Yours looks like an office that has seen plenty of use.
Well, yeah, that's basically it. It's the first office I've had where I had a door I could close.
All right, okay.
And
so I bet you know where absolutely everything is in there, don't you?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's let's see if I can. It's reversed, but that dark framed picture on this side here, this one, is a Jeff Sturgeon of rockets on the pad at Cape Canaveral.
Nice.
And then you can't really see the picture framed next to the big picture framed next to it is from my first published story, which happened to make the cover. I was looking when I got it, and I realized it was my story that was on the cover of Random Realities. I was like, whoa. And that was a rush.
That's cool. Have you ever been to watch a rocket or missile launch or anything?
Unfortunately, no. My visits to Canaveral have always been when nothing's been going on. The closest was after the Columbia fell apart and blew up on landing. And that was because my husband, well, actually, we were going to be there kind of for it, because my husband at the time was selling jet engine castings, and he was there for a conference. And it was one of the grimmest visits to the Kennedy Space Center I've ever made.
Yeah.
It was raining, and it was just, everybody was in shock.
So where are you calling in from right now?
Northeastern Oregon.
Okay, so I mean, you could go down the coast to Vandenberg and watch missile launches, right?
No, that's California.
Right, I know, but it's down the coast. Technically, it's down the coast.
If you want to talk like a 6-hour drive to reach I-5, and then another 12-hour drive to get down there.
You're in Eastern Oregon?
Yes, Eastern Oregon, northeastern, about 40 miles from Hills Canyon.
All right.
You're only one state away.
Yeah, I mean, out here in the East Coast, one state, it's like you can do that pretty easily.
Yeah, my husband used to have my husband's biggest client was Pratt and Whitney, so we came out a couple of times to visit, or I came out with him a couple of times, and it was like, whoa, blink by, I'm in another state. Wow, how did that happen?
So I just want to tell you, I used to live in Florida, and the one time I know the space shuttle is launching at 5:30 in the morning, so I get up and I walk to go see it, and every time space shuttle, I'd go out and I'd watch from my front porch, and I was the only person who came out. I mean, everybody else had like seen it, somebody like whatever, and I was like, this will never get old. Every single time I would do it, but I never saw anyone else watching. It's just
probably halfway across the country to watch the eclipse, though, man.
Well, I have issues.
I when we were going, we went to Kennedy Space Center several times, and it was the moon launch simulation. And then when they open the doors and you walk out and you look and see just how big that Saturn V was. That was
Yeah.
like,
I went there. I think now they've Disney-fied it, but I went when they had the moon landing or whatever, and the one where you could be like in the control room and they mimicked. Oh yeah, love that. I
oh
loved
yeah,
all the science and engineering, and now it's more, look, we have cute characters. Yay. So
yeah.
much preferred it before they Disney-fied it.
I'm glad. Well, I'm glad I saw it before then. But I mean, we went even before they were doing that part.
Oh
My
wow.
very first visit, and I'm trying to remember. That would have been in the early mid '90s.
Yeah. That's when I was in Florida. So
Yeah.
I got to vote in the 2000 election. So that's my claim to fame in Florida.
In fact, in 2000, we were the last plane in before, what was it, Matthew hit in Miami.
Yeah.
Not Miami. Yeah, Miami, because we were going to the Keys.
Yeah. So, oh yeah. You're a Floridian when you can just start. You name the hurricanes like, oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, Andrew. Yeah, and everybody knows it.
Mitch, that's who it was. Mitch.
Okay.
And I mean, it was we started out from Atlanta. About halfway down, the pilot said, flight attendants, take your seats. And we were going, and then as we landed, it was going. I looked at my husband. I said, "Is this what I think it is?" He was shaking his, because we had our son with us. And later he said, "Yes, that was wind shear."
Always a good time. It's great fun when you land a plane and everybody spontaneously applauds.
Right? Yes, that was exactly what happened. Because it's like, pilot comes on and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have landed." And everybody was like, "Yeah."
Well, you're going to land one way or another.
Yeah.
Right.
That's never the issue. You're going to land. In your travels, I guess you have also been a frequent attendee at Worldcon?
Not super frequent compared to like some people.
Anything more than one is frequent.
Okay, well, let's see. There was Lone Star Con 2. Let me go through. Denvention, Anticipation, Renovention, Sasquan. Yeah, those were 5 in-persons.
Okay, so they used to Worldcon just didn't used to be called Worldcon. Everybody came up with a new name for it every time.
Yeah, pretty much.
Kind of hard on the branding.
Yeah, I mean, you still have it. Like I think I was years ago when I was in high school, I was a supporting member of Discon 2 and Torcon 2. I found out about them in the back pages of Analog, and I found out that I could afford to. I mean, basically back then, what it got you was the progress reports and a pretty little convention book. That was pretty much what supporting got you.
For you youngsters out there, the back pages of Analog, that was a magazine where you had to look at advertisements and things like that to read something.
And Filthy Pierre's listing of science fiction conventions.
Filthy Pierre's?
Yeah.
That was the name of it? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. They still publish Analog, really?
Oh, yeah. I still occasionally write a science fiction short story and send it off to them. I was really, really close with the previous editor, and I mean, I was getting personal typed rejection slips from him.
Oh, that's nice though.
And then he rejected. And then he retired. Oh well.
How many people were attending those?
Probably about anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000. I think.
Because I was looking at something, and apparently this year's Worldcon in Scotland or wherever it was had like 9,000 people.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, I guess they must have had it in China or somewhere in that area, and
Yep.
nearly 19,000. So it's picking up. It's getting to be a much bigger deal.
It really varies depending on the location and who's running it, because if it's a convention committee that's kind of known for doing really good conventions and it's a big enough venue, I mean, World Cons are usually held in convention centers
Right.
because that's the only, and with multiple hotels, because that's the only place you can do it. Anticipation was in downtown Montreal, and
fun.
in the Montreal Convention Center. And my husband had clients in Montreal, and so he was like, "Oh yes, let's go to Montreal."
Business expense. We'll write this baby off.
Well, no, it wasn't a business expense. He didn't meet with anybody, but he knew his way around. And we went out to Quebec City and we did some sightseeing he knew about. And that was where I discovered absinthe mojitos.
Oh, that's never a good idea.
Oh, it was nice. I learned about all sorts of absinthe wonders in Montreal.
So people who are now listening to us, put in the comments if you plan on going to Worldcon or if you want to go but don't know if you'll be able to make it.
I think we should get a big van together, just pick people up across the country as we go, and just make it like a 2 or 3 week kind of thing, because you can make it across the country in 4 days.
Yeah.
It's like a long 4 days, right?
What do they call the van in Scooby-Doo?
That's right. Joyce. Yeah.
Actually, don't kid yourself. There were people who did that after 9/11, including some colleagues of my husband. They rented a car, and it was basically they did pit stops, and people slept while somebody drove.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's doable, but if you can't attend in person, virtual is pretty good.
So they do have that option, huh?
Yeah, they have a virtual option. And Glasgow, I mean, I was a virtual panelist and attendee for Glasgow, and it was very smooth. I was a volunteer for DiscCon 3, and that went pretty well. So I kind of have a perception of what goes into the Worldcon management. It's a lot.
Apparently this will be the 83rd here in Seattle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And I mean, in Seattle in August, you could have rain, but you're more likely to have sun. You're going to be quite a bit north, so it's going to be late sunsets.
Okay. And the solar maximum is probably still going on, so you might have a chance of seeing the aurora borealis.
Dude, possibly.
Don't get me talking about how big my telescope is. And that's not a euphemism.
And seafood. When you go to Seattle, you must, Ivar's acres of clams. Got to do that.
So, Joyce, they have. I'm just looking up on another page about Worldcon here, and they have various membership rates for ticket pricing.
Right.
So you have the adult attending membership, adult attending regular rate. There's a reduced rate, a regular rate. I don't know how you get that. And then you have Friend of Worldcon membership, which is a stunning $500.
That's for people who want to throw money at the convention to help it operate.
Oh, those are nice people. They sell many, 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 many more books than I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can tell you, because I signed up for the regular adult rate, the reduced rate is $175. The adult rate is $200.
Right.
And it seemed like you could just pick that you wanted the reduced rate. And I was like, if $25 makes a difference, then I don't need to be flying across the country.
You don't need to be going to that.
Yeah, and I believe the virtual rate is like 85.
It is, yeah, $85, exactly right.
Which I will be attending virtually, in part because I have, unless things really change on the disease front, I have cough variant asthma, and I just as soon not get sick with this stuff.
Fair.
So yeah, anybody going to Worldcon from the East Coast, then you're looking at hotel rates of about $250 a day. I'm assuming that's before taxes and everything. It's probably $300 a day. So you got 4 or 5 days worth of that. Your $200 fee, and then flight. You're looking at a $2,500 trip at bare minimum, without food and drinks.
The website also talks about you could stay at a hostel if you want to do that.
Dude, I'm 56. I'm not staying at a freaking hostel. That's not happening. That's just not happening.
Well, and the other thing too is one of the reasons Worldcon pops around is that it allows for local fans to come in and attend. Like Sasquan and Spokane brought in a lot of inland Northwest attendees for whom that might be the only convention they get to go to because they're so far away. And they might have relatives in Spokane and that sort of thing. So there's usually a big regional draw. Glasgow, I think, had a big attendance because it was easy for European attendees to come. Yeah. And when Worldcon is in Europe, it does usually get a pretty big draw for that reason.
Unfortunately, Mike, it was in DC in 2021. So
yeah, wow. that was a hybrid con, and that was when I worked. That was one where I was a hybrid, where I was a virtual volunteer.
So it looks like the bids for 2026, it's almost certainly going to be in Los Angeles,
which will be even more expensive.
2027 looks like Montreal or Tel Aviv.
Let's hope for Montreal.
Yep. 2028, possibly Brisbane, Australia, or Uganda.
Probably Brisbane.
Either one of those is just too far.
Yeah. But for people in that area, that's a great opportunity for them. And that's one argument for for continuing with the hybrid conventions, because it opens up participation around the world so that it truly does become a world con.
So the $85, I'm taking it that you've done the hybrid, the kind of version before. You just get to sit in on the live events.
Some live, but there are online only panels these days. Glasgow had both. They had streaming but only certain panels were streamed because of equipment limitations, and not all rooms were set up for streaming.
Sure. That will probably get better every year that'll get more and more, I bet.
I mean, the StreamYard was actually what Glasgow used for the online paneling.
No, it's so easy. I understand that.
Yeah, Mike and I can use StreamYard. Any idiot can use StreamYard. We should see if we can get coverage from Mike.
So we were talking before we came on, and I'd like to throw that out because it makes me feel so special that we got the privileged conversation. But anyway, when did you start publishing?
I started self-publishing in 2011. My first published short story was in 1996 in Random Realities. And then I ended up spending more time getting stuff published in small zines around Portland.
So you've been around the self-pub since just about the start.
Pretty close. I remember arguing with one now passed away influence in SIFWA about print on demand, and I said, this is going to open things up, and he's going, oh, print on demand is a bunch of junk, blah blah blah. Well, here we are, print on demand.
Yeah.
So how I know that it's changed in enormous ways, but how have you seen it change from a single user over the course of the last 13 years using KDP or whatever it is? I think they said the same type of thing about the Kindles when it came out as well. It's like nobody's going to do that. People are going to want to have that tactile kind of paper in their hand thing, but then those people, I guess, probably started getting a little older and realizing, hey, I can change the size of the copy.
That's a lot of it. I mean, before the Kindle really came in, you had people trying to there were older things. I mean, there were stories on the Palm. I think there were even Palm Pilot, which was an early handheld digital assistant, or the BlackBerry. But those didn't really take off. The Kindle was what really made it take off. I got into it once. A little company called Smashwords offered itself up as an alternative to Amazon Kindle. And those of us who published in those days have the wonderful stories about dealing with the Smashwords meat grinder. It's called the meat grinder for a reason. You sent your Word document to them, and then you crossed your fingers and hoped it didn't get chewed up too badly. And
what did they do to it?
Oh, all sorts of weird little formatting quirks. You had to format your Word doc. You couldn't use, I mean, one of the things I run into when I do the occasional edits for people, or I'll do a layout for a friend in Vellum. I mean, back then you didn't have, it was either you went and gave your Word document to Kindle or to Smashwords, and they translated it into something publishable. If you knew what you were doing coding wise, you could code it in Word, and there are still people who do that. But you needed to be a really good HTML coder to pull that off.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty much you submitted the cleanest document you could to Amazon and Smashwords, and then Barnes and Noble got into the business, and then it became Barnes and Noble, and then Kobo, and then Apple, and then Drafted Digital. When Drafted Digital came on, I was one of the first people to sign up for it because it made my life simpler. Right away, the first time I put something on Drafted Digital, and it loaded into Barnes and Noble faster than I could do it myself, I stopped doing it directly because it saved me an hour's worth of work.
So aside from Drafted Digital, then, what in the last decade has been the biggest improvement for either publishing side of it or the ability to get things out to people or advertise, or what's been the single biggest positive impact factor that you've seen?
The rise of easy to use publishing software and companies that allow you to design your own covers that don't look like junk. I mean, Canva and BookBrush for covers. I can do a decent cover for Ingram Spark, which is notoriously picky, in BookBrush very quickly. Formatting a book in Vellum before it was either you submitted your Word document or you learned a very complex you learned how to program InDesign, or you hand coded. And the rise of those particular software pieces, I could, if I, now I go through and I do my copy edits and my proofreading in Vellum, but just being able to get Vellum and its PC version, or the PC variant Atticus, which is more complicated and difficult to use from what I've seen, has just been a game changer. Because honestly, I look at the ebooks on my Libby that come out from library reading program, and the stuff I'm putting out is equivalent in quality, if not better, than traditional publishing.
Yeah.
Of course, having been and done editing, I was a volunteer proofreader for a medium-sized, well-known indie press for several years before things
You
just
say
got.
volunteer proofreader?
Yes, they used to assemble.
Dang.
The idea was that you got to see books from certain authors fairly soon, and they would assemble proofreading teams, and your job was basically to go through and find holes. Well, as a result, when I pick up any book, whether it's hard copy or whether it's an ebook, I can spot the typos. Now, that also means I miss some, including my own. You always miss your own.
Oh yeah, that's the fastest way to find them too, is hit publish and absolutely find one.
Well, and that's why this company had a team of several people, because the thought was that between 3 to 5 people, you would catch more than just one person doing the proofreading.
Yeah. Damn, I forgot. This happens once every couple of days. I have this great question. I totally forget what it is. Go ahead, Mike. I'm thinking. You're muted, Mike. You're still muted, Mike. Let's see how long he does this.
I'm trying to get Isaac to volunteer to do my editing in Atticus for me. So, I'm
is that you on the chat? Nice. Good grief, man. Pay attention.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was working for a while on the Heritage Author Republication Project with SIFWA, and worked with another person helping a writer format in Atticus, and I'm just like, I'm really glad I'm a Mac person. But it doesn't matter whether you're talking Atticus or Vellum. Vellum chokes, they both choke on anything other than plain, ordinary, normal styles formatting in Word. If you try to get fancy in Word, neither Atticus nor Vellum will like it.
Yeah, Word is not the place to get fancy. Word, if you're just typing, Word is fantastic. But you try to do anything out of the ordinary, and Word becomes But what I wanted to ask you, I finally remembered, is how do you go about, what's your method that you have found works the best to get people to actually review your book?
I wish I knew.
So,
Serious.
It was a long shot. I thought I'd throw it out there and see what.
Yeah. Seriously, if you look, I don't chase after reviews. I know that's supposed to be important, but you only have so much energy. And for me, trying to find reviewers, I tried doing it on Goodreads, and I was not. The problem with trying to solicit readers on Goodreads, especially for somebody that tends to write the stuff that crosses genres the way I do, is that you get a lot of, huh, what's this? I don't, type of thing. So I haven't tried NetGalley. I probably should, and I may very well do that here eventually. But part of the reason is I'm trying to run everything on a very tight budget.
Aren't we all? Have you ever used Scrivener?
Oh yes, I love Scrivener for writing, not so much for formatting. I used it for formatting for years before I got Vellum, and that was an exercise in pulling my hair out, because you have to do everything exactly right or you don't like what you get. But Scrivener is part of my writing process. I started out writing in WordPerfect 5.1.
Ooh, word perfect. My mind.
Word perfect. I love that
right
master document feature.
Yeah.
And
Scrivener allows you to take it to the next level. So I would draft a chapter. I draft a chapter in Word, then I paste it in Scrivener. And so this way I can go back and review very quickly for continuity when I'm drafting. I also keep my synopsis, because right now my organization is chapter by chapter synopsis, but I also have important things like timelines, ages, facts about the characters, facts about the world. I can put everything I need to know research-wise under the research tab in Scrivener. So I love it.
I keep feeling I should try it again. You know, I paid for it and I tried it once for about half a book and then said, no, I'm just going to go back to Word. This is more of a hassle than it's worth trying to figure out, you know, where what tab is and blah, blah. I guess once you get used to it, it's probably fine.
Yeah, formatting is, I find a formatting part to be more difficult. But like I said, I draft a chapter in Word and I paste it in Scrivener. And I have, because I have a 21-inch Mac, I have Scrivener open on one side and the document I'm working in on the other when I'm drafting. And it really works well that way. I use it as an organizational tool.
So with 24 books in the last dozen years, are you a plotter or a pantser?
Plantser. No, the later books in my first two series were very rigorously plotted because the cyberpunk space opera had people on Earth and people on the moon and people on a space station. Keeping track of where everybody was with 4 viewpoint characters was a challenge. And then my fantasy series, I ended up with 4 viewpoint characters scattered all over that world. And so I did a scene by scene matrix, at least for the first 2/3 of the book, and then it just all went out the window.
Did you use Excel? Did you use Excel?
No, I didn't use Excel.
You should totally use Excel.
It wasn't big enough. But what I did do is I would get a legal pad and draw lines on it. One side was a list of the characters, and then the other one was a scene scene by scene. Who's the viewpoint character? Who's in this scene? Who is it in this scene? What are they doing off stage? And I decided that I don't know that I'm going to do that many viewpoint characters ever again.
You do what Mike does and just write first person. You don't have to worry about any of that.
Yeah.
For me, I know people who love to write in first person. For me, I just kind of go, I only have one book in first person, and it doesn't resonate with me like third person.
So I always tell people I read exactly one article on the internet that said first person is what all the young kids like and it's easier to write. And I was like, okay, I'm writing first person present tense then.
The article didn't tell you, of course, is that young kids don't buy books.
and I don't know that it's easier either, but details. That's all I needed. I was like, now I have enough to start.
Well, and also too, it really depends on the genre you're working in. My first person one was kind of except that it was set in a rural area, but it's urban fantasy. And urban fantasy and paranormal romance and those, certain genres are better done in first person. And I don't necessarily write those genres.
Not yet.
If someone was telling you that they had a book in their head or whatever, and they were thinking about writing it, what would your advice to someone new to this industry be?
Play around with your characters. Write little short stories about them. One of the best pieces of advice I got was from Jamie Ford, who is better known as a literary or a book club upmarket writer, but his roots are in science fiction, and he is very, very obvious about that. But Jamie, I workshopped with him here at Fish Trap one year, and Jamie just said, write your characters doing something with food. Have your characters cooking. I wrote 2 vignettes for that made their way into the book. But that's how I get to know my characters. But first of all, fill out your characters, and I don't mean pull out a D&D character building sheet. Put them into scenarios. Get to know your characters. Figure out what your conflicts are. If you're having problems plotting, there are graphic organizers out there, but basically it's like, what happened? What's the problem? How do you get to solving the problem? Type of thing. Learn the story structure, but just write. Write, put those words down on paper, and don't fall in the trap of eternally revising. Get it on the paper. Figure your first attempts are probably not going to be what gets published. I like that comment. When in doubt, add lizard people. If you read my science fiction, it's coming. When in doubt, let's have a biobot.
If you notice his avatar, his second book is all about the Lizard King in his world. The first book has an angel on the cover, the second one a Lizard King, and the third one like an Incan sun mask, and the character's named Lord Arrogance. I've not read this series yet, and I'm like, I have no idea what the hell is going on, but I have to read it and find out.
I think it's under 500 pages.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but that's kind of true. What really got me off and running, because I had a critique group that really killed my voice for a while. I wrote essays for a while and had them published in and around Portland, where I was living at the time, and still actually do maintain a residence. And because the group I was in killed my voice. And it wasn't just me. Later, I talked to 2 other people in that group, and they had the same reaction. And so just write. Be aware that your first love is probably not going to be the one that gets published. You might be lucky, and that would be the one, but it might not. I borrow a lot from that first trunk book of mine. I mean, it will never see the light of day. For one thing, it's obsolete. For another, it is like bad.
Do you do that even now, 24 books in?
Oh yeah, even now. But yeah.
I'll tell you, my first book I actually just published a couple weeks ago, but I also did 14 cycles of revisions. So
for science fiction book.
Yeah. Well, that's the first book I wrote, though, and then I set it aside and said, maybe I can write fantasy. And 4 books later, I came back to it. But, I wrote that in 2017. And like I said, 14 trips through revising it before I finally felt I could publish. So, yeah.
I probably could. I mean, I threw pieces of the story into my first series. And one of the characters and the conflict was kind of carried into it. But I mean, then again, if you want to talk about the very first thing I wrote, I was in 6th and 7th grade, and I wrote a trilogy about a girl and her Palomino thoroughbred who wins the Triple Crown. So nice. I have no idea where that one is, but Do
you ever, when you do these little exercises with your characters, realize that the character that you love so much is just a dumbass?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's some of them are more dumbasses than others,
but they're so much fun to write.
They really are, because
you can sit there and go, are they really that dumb? Like,
what would a normal person do? Let's not do that.
Well, my Federation, the book I published last year, Federation Cowboy, The lead character is kind of, in a way, she's kind of abrasive, but she's a young woman who is escaping a very repressive upbringing and enters into a contractual relationship with a planetary representative as his assistant. And it's like, well, of course, you have this contractual marriage because it makes all of the confidentiality requirements easier. and then you can step in for your spouse if something happens, which something did happen. But yeah, that story was a fun one. I'm really sad it never really has taken off. I probably should try to see if I can get more interest developed into it. But
Do you have a newsletter?
I do. It's I mail it out through SendFox. I've also recently revived. I went away from Substack for a while with all the kerfuffle over right-wing publication through it, and then reluctantly came back because I wasn't getting much visibility. And that was mostly for like blog posts I was writing that weren't newsletter tied. But I do have a newsletter.
How do you get your folks for that?
What's that?
How do you build your audience for your newsletter?
I'd like to know. No, seriously, I originally got my list, and to tell you, this is how old it was. I did a list builder 10 years ago, and gave away a book and had to send out copies of the book by hand.
Oh.
Because BookFunnel was not a thing then even. So it was, and that was going through and doing all of that stuff by hand.
Yeah.
Was a challenge. But right now I'm going back into the Substack ecosystem. That's not my monthly newsletter though, which is at SendFox under Joyce Reynolds-Ward. But I'm only sending the newsletter out once a month, and I feel like I have things I want to blather about more often than once a month. So I write essays and send them out through Substack.
Wow. I am not happy with my newsletter. I'm not happy with my website.
I hear you.
All the things you have to do, and you're like, but how do you do it well? And why won't there be people who tell us?
Well, the thing about doing websites well is you have to throw money at it.
Yeah.
And a lot of money. And then you have to figure out how to maintain it yourself or keep throwing money to have someone maintain it for you. I would dearly love to be making enough to hire a personal assistant or a personal digital, someone to do personal assistant stuff. But to date, I haven't reached that point. No. But I don't do paid advertising very much.
Are you on any social media kind of presence?
Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Counter Social. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Dreamwidth. Those are the main. Dreamwidth is the successor to LiveJournal, basically. It's an open source version. Okay. And it became popular about the time that, or it became a thing about the time that LiveJournal was imploding.
All right.
I was always
things have I heard of.
Yeah, I enjoyed I really miss LiveJournal because the community there and the conversations were great.
I think this business, probably more so than a lot of other businesses that aren't artistic in nature, the community is pretty great, regardless of where you go, even on Twitter, which is renowned as a dumpster fire. the writing community is pretty awesome on Twitter. It's
yeah.
very, very supportive. And I mean, we've got 42, 43 people watching this right now. Thank you very much. And there's absolutely no good reason for Mike and I to be able to pull 40, 45 people at any one time, you know. It certainly isn't our charming good looks or anything. So they do appreciate the opinions of other writers such as yourself, and just getting that point of view, I think, is really important, kind of just hearing that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I got onto Twitter late. And the main reason for that was that I was teaching for many years, and my only social media presence was Facebook. And I was teaching back in the day when it was like, stay off of social media. And people were getting fired for careless pictures on Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah.
And even like blogs. If you were, I know that there were several teacher bloggers who lost their jobs over even, and they weren't saying stuff that was all that controversial, except that they were opposing standardized testing regimes.
Yeah. They used to tell us in the service a long time ago that if it wouldn't be something that you would tell your mother or want your family to see in the front page of the newspaper, don't freaking put it on social media. You know, which is pretty good advice still, I think.
Yeah. It really is. I mean, the thing with teachers too is that there's still those unspoken moral clauses that can get you fired. There was, I mean, 2008, 2009, there was a young teacher who got fired for a picture from her student teaching years of her in a pirate hat holding a red Solo cup and labeled drunken pirate.
She wasn't actually drunk. She was just.
Yeah. And I spent a lot of time at conventions hiding my drinks when I saw cameras out and about. So if you see older pictures of me with one hand behind me, I'm hiding a drink.
And now here we are with a book and a beverage, drinking beer and wine and stuff, and liquor and stuff as we talk to people and not even caring. We have so grown in society. Yay.
Well, and I mean, teaching is still that way.
Yeah.
There are still the unspoken moral clauses. And so, and I was teaching in a district that was fairly conservative.
In Oregon?
Oh, yeah.
That exists? That's a thing there?
Oh, yeah. This
Eastern
was
Oregon.
no, this was Western Oregon. This was
Oh,
a few miles. This was 20 miles outside of Portland.
Wow. Who knew?
Well, I was also kind of outspoken and a union activist. So I was, and when the union itself tells you, and this comes down at the national level, is watch your social media presence, be careful. And but there was explicit advice to stay off of Twitter. And so I didn't really get on Twitter until 2020.
Thank you, Tim.
But yeah, or, I mean,
died from dysentery.
The thing about it is that too is everybody thinks of Oregon as Portland. That's the Willamette Valley, and even in the Willamette Valley, you have extremely conservative people. One of the big influences in the rise of the right wing came from the Oregon Republican Party, and he was very active in organizing in the Goldwater campaign. And so,
that's going back a bit, but
okay. Yeah, and I mean, there's once you get out, it's more outside of the big urban area. So you're more likely to run into purple. But there for a while, we had people moving into Central Oregon from Southern California who were retiring, and they were very conservative. And you still kind of get that there. it's just the larger urban population tends to be liberal, but the rest of the state is agricultural and logging. And
from a writing standpoint, it's not bad though, because you get to see all that. You get to kind of incorporate all of those differences into your world, which makes it a more believable and compelling kind of place to be.
Oh yeah. There's it's very interesting that way. The other piece is that we have a major range of climate. Well, actually, the whole Washington, Oregon, and California. You have the coastal part that everybody thinks is nice and wet, and then in Oregon and Washington, especially, you cross the Cascades and you are in desert.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the Cascadian subduction zone. So you want to be to the east anyway.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the other side of the Cascades. They get that.
So, Joyce, I have an urgent question now I have to have answered.
Yes.
If I go to Worldcon next year, I'm going to take a couple extra days because I've never been in the Northwest. Should I spend those days sightseeing in and around Washington by the coast, or should I drive down to Oregon?
Really depends upon whether if you really want to do ocean stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's easily accessible from Seattle. You can go out on the Olympic Peninsula, and there's, the Olympic National Forest is amazing. In Puget Sound, there's all sorts of stuff you can explore. You can go up into Canada and do Victoria, and Vancouver Island, which is its own thing. If you're into coastal stuff, there's a lot of the Northwest stuff. There's good stuff in Oregon, but if you've only got a few days, you can cross the Cascades and see a lot. There's a town called Leavenworth, which is a faux German town. And I mean, it is, or a faux Swiss. You walk in there and it's like, you're basically going to the beer garden.
Nice.
But there's, it all depends upon what you want. And if you want to find out about the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, you can drive to the Tri-Cities. And
you can ask me. I work there.
Oh, okay.
I didn't work there for long.
But I mean, it all depends upon what you want to see and do. There's a lot of stuff in and around Seattle, in and around the water. There's the San Juan Islands. There's just stuff. If you're into Twilight, you could always go to Forks.
If you're into Twilight, we'll have to beat you about the head.
Yes,
just watch out for the vampires, man.
If I ever say I'm in the Twilight Row, I expect you to beat me over the head multiple times.
Yes, we'll drive out to Richmond and find you.
But the other thing too is that seafood is definitely the thing to do in the Northwest.
Yeah.
Not
salmon,
just
I'm sure.
Salmon, clams. Well, it's not really crab season. It won't really be fresh crab season because Dungeness is the king. The Dungeness rules, and Dungeness season is not until around Christmas.
It's not Christmas for the crabs.
They're really good. I mean, I think they're even better than stone crab. And king crab,
Oh, so you have this book out. Your next book is coming out in 3 weeks, and the one after that, like 3 or 4 weeks after that.
2 weeks after that.
Do you have covers of any of them? Do you have copies of any of them that you can hold up?
Nothing in hard copy, I'm afraid.
Okay. So why don't you tell us the name of the one that is released right now?
The one that is released today is The Cost of Power Return. The one that releases on September 10th is The Cost of Power Crucible. And the one that releases on September 24th is The Cost of Power Redemption. Crucible is in production and will be up for pre-order in a couple of weeks. The same for Redemption.
And when is Redemption coming out again?
24th, September 24th.
Awesome.
So you know you're a good author when you can, your title is just one word and it can encompass what the story is about, because I always have like a 28-word title and I'm like, okay, that's too long. Let's shorten it. And it takes forever to come up with a reasonable title, which I don't really think I ever do. But, you know.
It's weird because some books are easy to title. I think my next project is going to be a second series in the fantasy world of the Goddesses Honor series, and trying to come up with a series title and titles that tie into that title had me pulling hair. Well, it's one reason why every time I started thinking about it, I wrote another Martiniere series.
It's nice now, though, at least with Google and everything, to quickly be able to find out if the title that you want to use is already being used. You know.
Oh, even then, it gets, my first story that was published, The Ties That Bind. Do you know how many have been written with that title since then?
So I think my next book is going to be called Jurassic Park. You think I'll have any trouble with that?
On the other hand, one of my favorite short story titles is JC the Ski Bum.
Nice. That pretty much tells you everything you need to know right there.
Oh, maybe. It's funny too, because we were talking about point of view. I find it easier to do first person point of view in short stories. And JC the Ski Bum, which was published in Fantasy Scroll, a few magazines a few years back. Well, actually, the kicker was that I was doing, the middle school I used to teach with used to go up to Timberline Lodge on Mount Hood on Friday nights for inexpensive ski lessons, rentals, and lift tickets. So, I became a skier in my late 40s. And there was one time when I was riding up with another teacher and a student. He was in high school and he was a typical high school freshman, full of himself. And he was like, "Yeah, man, Jesus taught me how to ski." And my teacher buddy said, "Oh, you mean Jesus?" And then, "Nah, Jesus." And we were just like, of course he was shining us on, but it was like that was an opening line I couldn't miss.
No, yes, if it's staring you in the face like that, you kind of got to grab it.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Right. We didn't even get to a stupid question, Mike.
I know.
This is one of those episodes that's actually been, I think, probably useful and beneficial for people.
Yeah, I know. Probably why we have 45 people still watching.
Maybe we should try this more often. I don't know.
No. We don't want to get them used to it.
Yeah.
What are the other shows going to do?
That's right.
Well, I mean, part of it too is you have a former teacher here, middle school teacher, who's used to doing the da 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 da. Hey, let's keep this attention going.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Ro and I are like middle school children. So
that's right. Yeah. We're still like middle school students. Excellent. So the Cost of Power is out now. In a couple of weeks, the Cost of Power Crucible, and September 24th, the Cost of Power Redemption. Go pick them up. And Joyce will be forever grateful.
Yes. And so will my horses, because that means they get more cookies.
All right. Well,
there you go.
No better reason to do it than that. And for the 46 of you here, thank you very much for spending an hour and 8 minutes with us. We appreciate it. If you haven't hit the like and subscribe button yet, please do. We were at 302. We were at 303 earlier this morning, but 302 as we went to air tonight. And so we're closing in on that 500. So Mike gets that tattoo in his head.
And there it is. Because you mentioned it, I have to pull up the picture again.
Yes.
Cool tattoo.
This is the tattoo.
Want to hit subscribe, and you don't even have to watch the show. Just hit subscribe.
I will have to do that just to.
Yeah, well, yeah, you do. You're
going.
Yeah. In the contract, huh?
So I've told people that if we don't get to 500 this year, I still Adrian Gibson, who we interviewed, he's a tattoo artist. He's going to be at Worldcon, and he said he would give me this tattoo at Worldcon in August. So if we don't get it this year, next August, hopefully I will get it.
Oh, Herman, that's just wrong, man. All right. Mike, take us out.
Okay, it's time to wave awkwardly as
Thank
we wait
you for
for
joining
it
us,
to the end, and we're still